Okay, everybody, have a good session.
Dan, maybe let me know when you think we've got sort of a bulk of folks and you think it's time to start.
Yeah, we'll start once it hits 31, we can go ahead. Like time-wise, not participants-wise.
I was just thinking that. I was like,
that
just happened.
We did just hit 31 participants. Yeah, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Okay, I'm gonna, oh great, I can see people. I wasn't sure if I'd be able to actually sort of see who all these lovely participants are. Thank you all for coming. I see a lot of names and folks that I recognize and have gotten the privilege to work with over the years. So welcome. This panel is the building blocks of DEI mentorship and partnership on affordable housing projects. We don't have a presentation. We're just going to be really conversational and invite questions. So Maurice, Kenechi, and I will each kind of say a few words and ask some questions of each other. And then really, we'd like to hear your questions. So you can put them in the chat and we'll be kind of monitoring the chat, or feel free to raise your hand as well, which I think, Dan, as my tech person, that can they ask questions or do they all need to go in the chat?
Let's direct all questions to the chat, and then when we get to Q&A, we can get to them, or whenever you feel like it, we can check them out. But okay. Yeah, we'll put them all in the chat.
Perfect. Great. Thank you. So welcome, and I am going to kick it over to Maurice to kind of start us off.
Well, thanks everyone, and thank you, Afton. One of the things I was asked to talk a little bit about is Walsh Community Builders, and kind of like its purpose and how it relates to what we're doing. And first, I'd like to say how we started, how OWCB started, which is about 10 years ago. It was over a cup of coffee with myself and Bob Walsh. We were discussing how to support small businesses and how large businesses have a role to play. And we talked about, at the time, I had a mentoring program that I was mentoring about a dozen smaller firms. And Walsh has always been a leader in creating opportunities. So we said, well, if we could create an environment where the opportunities are there and the support's there for those small businesses, and they could communicate with another small business on success, we felt like that was a winning combination. So that's where OWCB was created from. One of the first projects that we did was with PCC, Southeast Campus, and there we really started to engage even more certified firms to basically not only help them be successful on the project, but be successful in their business. So helping them understand the business side of it as well as just the project delivery side. You know, some of the challenges that we've had was, you know, kind of explaining to owners and developers the relationship and what we're doing. Because a lot of times, and a lot of these different partnerships might have happened in the past, but ours was really focused in on not just the success of O'Neill, not just the success of Walsh, but the success of the certified firms on the project and creating that real holistic support for those firms. Since then, and that was like I said, 10 years ago, since then we have this large success and following. So, we're starting to see greater and greater number of utilization, not only for the contracting, but for the workforce side of what we do, because we help those firms to diversify their workforce as well. So we get to see these businesses grow and transform, and they continue to come back to us looking for additional opportunities, which we're really excited about, because we have some firms that are like, hey, I want to leave this part open. When's this project going to happen? Because we really want to work with you guys. So there's the old saying of, you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And we feel like our partnership with our subcontractors, our owners and developers, we're going far together. And so we're excited to be here and excited to take you guys' questions. With that, I want to just pass it off to Afton to continue this conversation.
Thanks, Maurice. Yeah, so just a little more history on O'Neill Walsh Community Builders, that we call OWCB for short, just to, we love our acronyms in construction. We've completed to date 9 projects together. We have 1 currently under construction, and then 1 in pre-construction, and sort of a handful of others that we are awaiting funding that will kick off into pre-construction here in short order. And on each of those projects, we are really, it's really collaborative. We're not a partnership of sort of convenience just to win a job. We actually will manage and work on that job together all the way through pre-construction to construction. Different projects might have different teams assembled that are some O'Neill, some Walsh, just depending on the sort of resources, needs, and constraints of each of the companies at that given time. But we really end up, the project runs as if we're kind of one team. Even though maybe the superintendent is from O'Neill and the assistant superintendent is from Walsh, they act as if they're one company and with shared goals. So wanted to kind of touch a little bit on what our keys to success have been. I think this is really important, is the idea. One thing we were hoping that this panel would provide to people, a lot of people are talking about partnerships. I know on the design side, with subcontractors, even with owners, there's a lot of people are looking to partnerships as a way to really push forward equity goals, and share capacity and share lessons and share, as Maurice always says, intellectual capital with sort of the broader community. So the things we've learned, and Maurice, feel free to interrupt if you think I've missed something, but shared values are really critical. We need to be, O'Neill and Walsh are really on the same page about what type of projects we want to build, what's important to us. Our sort of mission statement is to build projects with purpose. And that it's really important that we kind of keep that central, because that allows us to always be on the same page, especially as we're making decisions. Establish trust. I would sort of caution anyone from heading into a partnership with someone that maybe they just met, or it doesn't have to be a long relationship, but you want to make sure that you have that level of trust in your partner, so that you can have the tough conversations, whatever those might be. Construction and design, everything is not without risk. So it's really important that you have a long shared trust. And as Maurice said, Walsh and O'Neill had been working together in a contractor-subcontractor capacity for almost a decade before we entered into this partnership. Open communication. Nothing is hidden from each other. I think Allie, who is Maurice's partner, and I joke that we probably talk, at least multiple times a day on the various projects. And behind our spouses might be the most dialed number on our cell phone bills. A shared mission, which I think I mentioned, and then that each partner really brings something to the table. I think a lot of people look at a partnership like ours and with a prime contractor and a minority subcontractor and say that, it's just us sharing capacity or capacity building, something like that. But that's definitely not the true story. Yes, we might bring a really robust estimating group or quality control that we can share with O'Neill, but they bring tons of experience and working, as a minority contractor. So we get that perspective, especially as our jobs have a lot of the people we subcontract to are minority and women-owned firms. And so by having O'Neill as our partner and on working on those projects, they have a really unique perspective. And honestly, they have a level of trust with subcontractors that we as the sort of larger prime don't always have. And their experience and what they can bring to the table and how they can really bring such robust subcontracting experience and perspective is a huge benefit and asset to the project. And really that's kind of across the board, I would say, in all of our outreach goals and outreach efforts that happen on a lot of these affordable housing projects. Their perspective is invaluable. I could probably go on and on about this, but I will kind of stop it there and we can get into questions, but I think that tees us up really well to Kenechi, who we asked to, who is joining us on the panel today as well, because she has a really amazing perspective as executive director of PBDG and can kind of, I think has some great things to say. However, Kenechi, before you start, of course, I realized, Maurice, I don't know if you and I really ever introduced ourselves. Sometimes we forget in these online versions that we might need to actually introduce ourselves. So I'm Afton Walsh. I'm the Director of Community Engagement for Walsh Construction. I'm the managing partner of O'Neill Walsh Community Builders, and I get to be a project manager every once in a while. So Maurice, did you introduce yourself?
I could do it now. I apologize, but good catch. I'm Maurice Rahming, principal of O'Neill Walsh Community Builders, and also O'Neill Construction Group and Howard Jacobs Masonry and O'Neill Electric. And so with that, I'll pass it to Kenechi.
Thank you both. And yes, my name is Kenechi Onyeagusi, and I'm the Executive Director of Professional Business Development Group, PBDG. PBDG is a trade association of minority and women entrepreneurs in the construction industry. Our primary purpose is to advocate for equity and inclusion in the construction industry and proactively support, mentor, and provide access to resources to marginalized and underrepresented business owners in the building trade. So that's a little bit about who we are, and we accomplish our mission through education, training, and advocacy. And one of the reasons why this particular conversation is really important is because the OWCB team is an example of what can happen when subcontractors are supported through their journey with general contractors, and what a really great partnership can look like. PBDG was established in 2013 as a nonprofit by 4 local minority and female subcontractors, with Maurice being one of the founding members and Walsh being one of our very early supporters and partners. And those 4 got together, pulled talent and resources, and really provided a space. It grew from a meeting every Saturday in Maurice's garage and him mentoring about a dozen subcontractors to us moving into what is a almost 3,000 square foot training center, where we work with subcontractors and help them in their journey. One of the really important things, I'll say this and kind of pass it on, that distinguishes PBDG's members programs from other business support programs is that our approach to delivery is comprehensive, flexible, and really kind of centered around the needs of the folks that we serve. So as a trade association, we have a membership of over 150 businesses, most of which are really subcontractors who are seeking to get to the next level. We provide a space where people can interact with each other, network, and really get their next opportunities. And we partner with firms like Walsh Construction to ensure that people are meeting their next project opportunities, and also agencies are present at PBDG because it allows them to find their next general contractor. So I like to think of us as an ecosystem that really supports the project owners, the general contractors as they seek to meet their project goals, and then of course the subcontractors are our very primary audience. So that's a little bit about PBDG. I think the other thing that I'll say is in regards to mentorship is, again, this wisdom of the community is one of the ways that I like to describe it. We have subcontractors learning and really getting, I love the word that you use, Maurice, when you describe this, the intellectual property, right? Because it's not just a mentorship where you say, well, do this. As we saw in the OWCB example, it's this idea of transferring information so that the subcontractor, as they're growing, is able to glean from the years of experience that the general contractor has, and in a joint partnership way, really grow together. So mentorship really has the core focus of it being transferring information, and then we see a full circle growth, because what's happening is Maurice is now mentoring other subcontractors and being a good example of how you can pass that information on. And our hope is that as we continue to perpetuate that cycle through our nonprofit, that we see many more OWCB type relationships emerge. I think with that, we can open it up to questions, unless Maurice, Afton, if you have any additional comments.
Yeah, I know we sort of had a couple questions of each other that we wanted to ask. Why don't we do that, and then we can open it up. I'll just make one kind of comment that I know, Maurice, we've often gotten, and especially, I think in those early days, about like, aren't you just going to build your competitor? And, I think our response to that was like, yeah, that's the point. And like, there's so much work in the city right now that, we are growing, the pie. It is not, we're not fighting over pieces. And I think that's important to remember. I think if people are hesitant to, should I partner or should I not? It's if we all kind of, increase our capacity together, it's going to be great for the industry as a whole.
Yeah. Well, what's really unique about this partnership that you have is you've had a decade and some change to build it together, but I'm sure it didn't just happen without challenges, right? So what are some of the challenges that you faced in kind of norming and storming to get here?
Yeah, that's a good question, and kind of actually to that latter point. There was a little bit of uncertainty in our internal team and internal staff, sort of saying, hey, what is this partnership, and will that affect maybe my job or my, our volume or whatever it might be. And so making sure that messaging to the whole company from the very early days was really important, that, this is a good thing, and this is to make all of us better. This is positive thing for the industry, for our company, was really important, so that, everyone down to our painters and our laborers understood the importance of the partnership, and it had to come from the top and, be communicated down to everyone, because it's not effective if people don't really understand, what are the reasons and those shared values and why it's important. And then there were just the typical, IT and, some of those just logistics of working together that probably like any business starting and any collaboration, you have to work through the logistics of sharing information. Those are probably we are now actually going through a little bit of some growing pains around insurance, which is sort of an interesting one that, as we evolve and we grow and have more and more projects, we're having to really make sure that the logistics of it, things like insurance and risk are all properly in place to make sure that we're all protected in the right way. So that's, those kind of things that you would think about as a regular business, you also need to think about as a partnership. Maurice, do you have any that you can think of that I missed?
I think you covered it extremely well. So.
Cool. I know a question I had, kind of Maurice, as I mentioned earlier, one of the really great things about having O'Neill and Maurice on our team and working on these projects is that of their perspective as a minority contractor, and as Kenechi mentioned, how much mentorship you do personally of a lot of firms in our city. What are you seeing are the biggest, the main resources or things that subcontractors need to overcome some challenges to be able to really thrive and grow? Kind of your perspective.
So one of the things I would say is that a lot of minority contractors come from the field. So it might be a carpenter that decided to hang their shingle and open up a company, or a painter that wants to start their company, or someone that does plumbing that says, I want to be a plumber. And they haven't had the ability to actually understand what needs to happen on the office side of it, the back office. And so what happens is those firms, and that's where the intellectual property really comes into play, is because they might have never done submittals before. They might not know what an RFI is. They know how to do the work, and they can do the work extremely well, but there's all this office stuff that needs to happen. There is also the financial literacy that comes with contracting, recognizing that, you're not going to get paid the same day you do the work. You're 60 to 90 days out before you get paid for the work that you've done. So you really have to fully understand that cash flow end of it. And so providing those resources, providing that both that intellectual property, but also that training availability, technical assistance, to be basically help them there to be even more successful than, like I said, the majority of the ones that I talk to, they know how to do the job, right? They just haven't had the experience on doing all the payroll and everything else that's associated with the office side, because they come from the field. So I think if we want to move the needle, we really have to look at those resources and being able to do that. And I think if we do that successfully, we'll see more and more certified firms, more and more success stories, and more participation. So, and thank you, Afton, for that question.
It got me thinking just of the, one example I think is we had did a project for Northwest Housing Alternatives, their campus, and we brought on a plumber who had, he'd had a business for a long time, but was starting to grow and do some commercial work. Great plumber, but didn't really know much about estimating. And, Maurice and I sat down with him in Maurice's conference room and went through all the specifics about how to do takeoffs and, Maurice's experience, on the electrical side and the software and things that MEP tend to use in estimating, was just really, it was so valuable to help, make sure that he could be successful on that project.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Oh no, he continues to grow, and it's great. It's great to watch as they grow and build their companies. So I actually have a question for Kenechi. What does the industry need to do to participate and engage with certified firms? And what does PBDG need to do to help create more successful programs, as I should say? What do you feel like is needed?
I think the industry needs to replicate what has happened here. The knowledge transfer that you and Afton have described is really kind of that game changer. We have a training center, as I mentioned earlier, where PBDG really focuses on trying to establish relationships like this, but we need every part of the industry, the subcontractors, the general contractors, the project owners, to really be mindful and intentional about making sure that the knowledge transfer happens. The PBDG is very actively and aggressively, quite honestly, recruiting volunteers that are willing to share the information that they have, are willing to sit down and talk with a subcontractor. We're looking for general contractors that see kind of construction with that lens of we're growing the pie, right? Because I think for as long as the industry is looking at diversity as, oh, if this minority firm grows and I shrink, then we will continue to see people shy away from this type of relationship. It's really important that we have general contractors that come in with this openness of, let's grow our economy together, let's transfer the knowledge that we have, let's invest in diversity and in the subcontractors that can help us meet our goals, and also provide opportunities to work. It's easy to work with the same subcontractor for many years because you've known them, and I think that's fine, but are you looking at diversifying the bench, right? So in this particular case where not only has Maurice grown, but he's also brought on other firms to grow with him, the whole kind of ecosystem is supported when we're not only transferring knowledge, but we're providing opportunities to work, and honestly, supporting programs like PBDG that allows a fostering and is a breeding ground for these type of natural partnerships to occur in community.
Yeah, I think it's pretty naive, not naive, but I mean, this is what construction has been doing forever. I mean, we partner with people and we mentor each other and we all grow together. It's just that those doors have been closed to only some. So I think the model is not revolutionary. It's just including everyone in that model.
I agree. What really I think was a really good graphic for me, Afton, was when you said it's growing the pie. When people come in, when diversity happens on our job sites, or when subcontractors also get to work, it's not taking away, it's increasing the capacity. There's so much work that's going to be happening in our region, and a lot of them have goals. And so how do we make sure that we are utilizing resources like PBDG to intentionally build those goals, those relationships, those partnerships, transfer the knowledge that needs to happen, and support the growth of our subcontracting community?
I see a question. Maurice, I can ask this unless you had anything else you wanted to add on this topic.
Go right ahead.
Okay, so there's a question about if we've seen partnerships with architecture firms that are similar. And I will say that definitely lots of architecture, we've seen lots of partnerships. I see some people here who I know have engaged in partnerships on our jobs and other jobs. I don't know of any that are sort of formally established and sort of long lasting. They might be for specific projects, and then kind of go their separate ways. You know, architecture has some unique elements with who's going to put their stamp on, and engineering is similar, you know, who will put the stamp and who holds the different insurance for that. So there might be some architects that could better answer that. I don't know, unless Maurice, you know of any architecture or engineering firms that have sort of longer partnerships.
Yeah, I can't think of any off the top of my head, but one of the things I would say is that I think it becomes contagious almost, where once you start doing it, you know, it seems like it's like might be clunky. There's always concerns. Everyone's afraid of doing something new. But once it's done and once you see the success and how the relationships can work and build, and then you start to see how it actually positively affects the entire job site and how everyone kind of works together, and you turn these jobs into people are smiling and laughing and enjoying each other's company, then it becomes like, this is a different thing. This is new. And I think a lot of the subcontractors we work with, we see that as well. So we see this thing of, oh, well, if it's an OWCB project, that goes on top of the list. We're really interested in wanting to work with them because we just enjoy the work, right? And so I would say with architectural firms, I'd say, try it, right? I think that you'll be pleasantly surprised and be like, oh, wait, this is actually helping our firms obtain more work and actually fill in gaps that we might have, and really be able to communicate and have that information sharing that is usually not always there.
So the one thing that I will add to this question is, it specifically asks, do you know of any architectural firms who partner with one specific construction firm or one particular set of subcontractors? So it's, yes, there have been firms that just have, you know, whether it's an OWCB that they're working with. And the idea of partnering is really in this context, it's kind of construction firm to construction firm or architecture firm, but absolutely. I think those kind of business development type strategic partnerships are very important in the ecosystem, and we see them all the time.
Anyone else have any questions, or either put them in the chat or raise hands, and Dan, you can help me. Or I will look for hands.
I don't see any hands right now, but
Okay.
I'll be on it.
Thanks.
So one question that I've recently been asked quite a bit from architecture firms actually is, what does a partnership between you know an A&E firm look like? So you have a large architecture firm who's partnering with a smaller architecture firm, and you know, maybe what do you do when you're not busy? It was kind of an interesting question. So for OWCB, when you don't have projects that you're working on together on any given year, what do you do? Do you just kind of say goodbye, I'll see you after the summer?
Fortunately, we have yet to really have any lull, or we don't have something either percolating or under construction. But the nice thing is we do still work with O'Neill as their electrical business on a regular basis. So we kind of always have that pipeline of communication open, and we're always talking to each other about, you know, oh, what should we be looking at? What projects are exciting? Where do we want to grow our business? And so, you know, we meet on a roughly quarterly basis, just as a sort of not about specific projects, but about just our partnership as a whole. That's, I think, part of the open communication is we meet and we sort of look at what is our pipeline, you know, what type of work do we want to be looking for? Are we happy with how everything's going? Where can we, you know, share resources with each other? So continually kind of doing strategic tech check-ins.
And I'll just piggyback on that a little bit. It's really about the relationship, right? So I think that if we had no projects for a year, I'm pretty sure Afton, Allie, myself, we'll all still be talking, right? And so it's about the relationship. We look at it as, more of a family than a transaction. And so we have a lot of conversations, about the OWCB, but we also have a lot of other conversations. So when Afton had said about, if you're going to do this, you really want to be able to get to know who you're getting into that relationship with, as far as the companies, that is critical. And so, I know that, if there was nothing going to happen, I know that we would continue to have these conversations and continue to talk about the industry and just how everyone's doing, because I think what we've recognized is that we all care about each other, and it's a community that is, we built those relationships well beyond just a project. I know that we say projects with purpose, but there's a lot of purpose even outside the project. So that's what I'd say on that. But we definitely always talk. I think I talk to Afton at least once a week, but I know Afton and Allie talk probably daily.
One thing I might actually add, I was just thinking of other sort of benefits of the partnership is, I would imagine everyone on this call and, everyone here is, we're all hiring, or trying to hire a lot right now. And I think that with partnerships, training is actually a really good side benefit that, Maurice will hire maybe a PE or an assistant superintendent, and, they can work on one of our joint projects and get ramped up speed pretty quickly, because we can, we might have to be doing a larger project that has a lot of mentors. So it's almost like mentorship at the, even at the job site level and at the staffing level, not just the corporate level. And I think that's a really big benefit, kind of across the board. Just, as people learn.
Yeah, I will say that as a technical assistance provider for these type of relationships, I really love the joint venture opportunity learning, and there's quite a few thoughts on joint venture versus the mentor protege approach, and I think there are benefits to both, but what you're describing, Afton, is kind of that long-lasting impact that you get from being able to share resources, and is not just I'm passing down information sitting right next to you, but having your whole staff be involved in that training, I think, is excellent, and hopefully the future of what technical assistance and partnership looks like for our industry.
I feel like, oh my gosh, I almost want to start asking questions of the audience, because I see some of our project managers who have worked on OWCB projects. I see some clients who have worked, some owners who have engaged OWCB. So, it'd be interesting to hear any of their perspectives or thoughts. And I'd also be curious to know if, I guess, maybe people can put in the chat or raise your hand if you're thinking of partnerships, or I know some of these firms have done their own partnerships. And if you feel like there's some lessons learned or successes that you've seen in the partnerships you've done. I know there's a lot more experience in the room than just the three of us.
And whilst everyone's typing away, because I'm sure you are, you better be, is, one of the things I would say that really works with like these types of partnerships and the close relationships that end up being built with the subcontractors is, I remember having conversations with some of these subcontractors where like, we really want to make sure that we get good utilization even more so than we usually get on the workforce side. In being able to have subcontractors that are willing to engage with organ tradeswomen, PYB, Constructing Hope, POIC, and say, hey, we want to hire some of your people to get them on the OWCB projects. And I mean, some of our outcomes are just pretty phenomenal with, areas where majority of workers are minorities or women working on it. So we get this diverse workforce because our subcontractors are looking at saying, they enjoy the relationship so much that they're like, yeah, like I said, it's contagious. So then everyone's kind of on board and saying, what can we do to make sure that we have a diverse workforce to, even exponentially increase the numbers. And like I said, those workers will become contractors someday. So we're building up that pipeline. And so done right, we can really change the way construction viewed and what happens on construction sites. There's a lot of negative stuff that we see in the news that happens on the construction sites. We have to address that, whether through, Green Dot and Rise Up and, Safe from Hate. But there's also a lot of good things, and we really need to start looking at how we can, we have these programs that help. We got to make sure that those programs are successful. And we also have to make sure we have buy-in from both the primes, the subs, and the workforce. And, this is one step to actually help increase that. And with that, if I'll ask a question of Kenechi that is like, as far as like Rise Up and that, how do you see that playing into this type of work? And you're on mute.
Thank you. That's a great question. So Rise Up is a bystander job site culture program, bystander intervention and job site safety training program that PBDG has been working with organ tradeswomen to implement. And the work is really kind of focused on the construction industry culture. If you have been in construction for any length of time, it's been really interesting to me, the different horror stories that I've heard around what happens on the job site. It's become kind of a known rhetoric that people of color and women have a much different experience working on job sites than white counterparts or male counterparts. And so Rise Up is a program that really focuses on changing the job site culture. And you may have heard about Safe from Hate, and some of you may have taken the Safe from Hate pledge. But what Rise Up does is really kind of implement what you've pledged to do. So it is a tool, it's a program that from day one, when a worker walks on that job site, says, these are the ways that we expect you to behave. This is the group agreement that we have as a project owner. This job site is safe from any kind of harassment, bullying, and intimidation. And what happens when you set those expectations from day one is people start to kind of sit up a little bit. And see that, oh, well, it's not business as usual, right? We can't kind of come in here with the thought of, intimidating others, because the honestly, people are leaving construction not because it's hard to get up at 4 a.m. to work, but because the environment is so toxic. And we've heard stories of folks just not knowing what they're going to meet on the job site, and so they quit. And these are great, able-bodied folks that we so desperately need in the industry. So we're trying to reshape construction culture. We're trying to retain the talents that we do have. And I think the job site, the general contractor, the project owner that embraces kind of normalizing good behavior, normalizing respect on the job site, is the one that gets to keep their workforce. if you've tried to hire recently, it's a little hard. And so this is a tool that you can implement on your job site that really allows you to serve the needs of folks there. And what's really interesting is on sites that have kind of this job site culture programs implemented, folks have a voice. They start to speak about the things that are bothering them. So rather than having people just quit and leave and you don't know why, these issues are surfaced, and so people are dealing with them on the job site, and there's a higher rate of retention. I think we have a long way to go as an industry to really ensure that all of our job sites are safe, but hopefully through Rise Up and other programs like it, where we start to see construction really embrace diversity and the safety of the men and women that work on our job sites.
And I think it's a great program. We've gone through that for a project, and it's really useful. I think, you know, management, and that matters. The people that are, you know, in positions of leadership and in positions of management makes a huge difference. You know, when you have a job site trailer that has women and people of color on that, you know, leadership, in that leadership and in the supervision as labor, you know, as foremen and things like that, it has a big impact on the culture. And yes, trainings I think are critical and really important, but that piece is also, you have to have both to see bigger change. And there was a question about the onboarding process for the DEI onboarding process for employees and partners, and what evaluation process. So maybe Kenechi can speak, but as part of the Rise Up program, that's part of it is not just training, but actually every person who steps foot on that job site goes through a sort of site orientation, like we would normally would, that, you know, here, a safety site orientation. They, in addition to that, is sort of the expectations around bullying, harassment, racism, sexism, and what to do if you, you know, how to implement bystander intervention sort of at each person when they come into the job site.
Yeah. You know, it's Afton, I think what you're describing is an example of success, what success could look like if everyone in our industry, every general contractor, every subcontractor adopted normalizing good behavior. And I call it good behavior, right? Because we know how we want to be treated, and we know how we expect others to treat us, but all of a sudden, you know, people can walk on a job site, and then that's just not the orientation of what we expect is not communicated. So Rise Up attempts to do that, and really does do that, I think, very successfully when there's a leadership buy-in. So it's really important that as you onboard employees and partners to say, this is how we expect you to treat people of color and women on our job site, that message is coming from the leadership. Making sure that it's not just a piece of paper that you put on the table, or, oh, this is our DEI plan, you can read it in your free time. One of the ways that we implement Rise Up is by training the supervisors and the managers, all of the executive leadership, and making sure that they are part of the training. A lot of times when we do the train the trainer, the managers are the ones training the folks on the job site. So it's really kind of company pervasive when it's done that way. There are a lot of different ways, and the folks on the job site get the training, and then the people in the offices also get the training, because it's important that people are hearing the same thing, and that has been really successful. There's a question here that
Maurice, I think, sorry, Maurice,
Yeah.
did you have something?
Yeah, I was just going to say something really quick. And the other thing was, when you see the diversity in the trailer and the leadership positions, right, that also sends a message. And so when you have your foreman meetings, right, and you see a lot of diversity in those foreman meetings, right, it tells that, hey, look, you're included in this. And so one of the key things that we look at on a lot of the projects is, do we have women and people of color that are journeymen, that are foremen, that are leading, and so that people can see themselves and see their next steps and be able to say, yeah, I'm accepted in this environment. And so, that's one of the unique things that happens when you have these type of partnerships. Go back to you, Kenechi.
Well, there's a question about.
There's a question, yeah.
I'll answer this question, but one last thought is just looking at the audience. It matters for architects and owners too. Like, I think architects and owners being out in the field, walking around, talking to people, your presence, I think is important, and that you communicating that, what your expectations are and holding job sites and contractors accountable, I think is really important too. So you have an important role to play. So the question was just a little bit more about, I think, OWC's structure and number of employees, field versus admin. So we don't have any employees of OWCB. So everything gets staffed by Walsh and O'Neill, depending on the project. So when we get a contract, we contract to the owner as OWCB, and then we basically subcontract it to O'Neill and to Walsh. And we operate it as a full company, very integrated, but the subcontracts get kind of assigned. And that's just the sort of logistical, contractual relationship and how it all has to work. But it might be like, we just finished the Meyer Memorial Trust headquarters about a year ago, and the superintendent was an O'Neill superintendent, the assistant was a Walsh. Allie and I shared project management duties, kind of depending through pre-construction and construction. So really each project ends up looking a little bit differently, but we share resources and staff the job accordingly, if that answers that question.
And one thing I'd say, and this is just for the owners and developers in the room, is when we look at our utilization numbers, we only count the utilization that is self-performed by the certified firms. So there is no modifying of numbers under. So if the firm's not doing the work, then we don't count that. So if O'Neill's holding the subcontract, for example, of a majority firm, we don't count that in our calculation. We only count the work that's done by O'Neill or the subcontractors that O'Neill or Walsh would hire that are certified. So when we talk about getting these great numbers, they're actually people doing work on the job site. And I think that is another critical aspect of what we do kind of differently than maybe others.
Maurice, this question I think is, I know Maurice could talk about this for days. So do you work with apprenticeship programs? And if so, do you know any that are focused on expanding opportunities for people of color?
Yeah, and so I could definitely talk about this for days. So one of the things that we worked on collectively is ensuring that the apprenticeship programs have, and a lot of them we've gotten them to change the way that they select people into the programs, right? And so we have the pre-apprenticeship programs, for example, that focus on the BIPOC and women communities, right? And then we over a number of years have the apprenticeship programs either have direct entry, right? So some of these programs are pretty aggressive to get into, right? And there's like the IBEW will have 2,000 applicants, right? So direct entry is huge if you go through one of these programs. Others say, okay, we will recognize you on another tier, but we will act as if you've been in for a year and a half, right? And so that might be on a material handler type position where if you go through a program, you're going to be making quite a bit more than if someone just came in off the streets and took that. And also being intentional, and we worked closely with them, being intentional on how they are diversifying their apprenticeship programs. And so we feel like we've had some really, really good success there. There's always more to be done, but they kind of see, and it's when we have owners, when we have contractors, and we have subcontractors asking for this as well, then the apprenticeship programs can then go ahead and make sure that they're changing and leveling the playing field. And also working very, very closely with the pre-apprenticeship programs, because that's kind of your feeder route. So you end up with community organizations that feed into the pre-apprenticeship programs that then feed into the apprenticeship programs. And I'm happy to say that I've gotten more positive input than anything else as far as how can we change the way the industry looks at including women and minorities as far as on the apprenticeship side.
I just put a couple of the names of the pre-apprenticeship programs that are that we, all three of us, work with a lot. There are others throughout the state, but these are just a few that came to mind at first blush. I think we have 5 more minutes, so I guess any burning questions, or maybe Kenechi, you can bring us home.
Well, we'll give space for any burning questions, but I think this has been a really rich conversation, and I'm going to actually put in the chat our website, pbdgweb.com. Please check it out and feel free to reach out if you have additional questions. But I think this panel is a really good example of what can happen when industry supports each other. OWCB has really created something that we are actively working on replicating for as many that are interested through our training center. It's great to see a subcontractor that not only has a thriving business, but is also in a joint venture relationship and is bringing others along with them. And it's great to see a general contractor that has invested so heavily in another business, as well as the opportunities to bring on other subcontractors. So I'm going to close this with a huge thank you to this team for being good role models, and honestly an invitation for anyone here who's interested in learning how they can invest in our industry. PBDG is actively recruiting for volunteers. We're looking for companies that want to be part of the culture change in community. We're looking for companies that are interested in helping grow the capacity of minority firms, and really kind of start to make sure that we're growing this pie together. So if you have additional resources that you're willing to invest back into the community, please reach out and contact us. PBDG is a community of people who are really rewriting the narratives for our state, and would love to invite you to join us in that journey. I think that's it. I'm going to put my email address in the chat, and Maurice, Afton, any closing comments?
I just want to thank everyone for taking the time to hear what we're working on and what we feel like is a way of moving this industry forward. And like I said, I really do appreciate everyone taking their time here. Afton?
No, just thank you. Thank you both. And I also put my email in the chat. So have a great day, and I'll make a plug. Attend all the rest of the Oregon Housing. There's so much great content out there. So, I thank you so much for joining us. See you later.